all the characters in solo leveling, monarchs are by far the strongest ones. They are pretty much like gods, each ruling over a different race and possessing enough power to destroy the entire world. So in today's video, I'll be explaining and ranking all 10 monarchs, starting with the weakest one, Qureshi. Qureshi is the monarch of plague and the queen of insects. Her powers revolve around spreading plagues, and she mostly deals damage through slow decay and corruption rather than raw strength. In terms of design, she's a humanoid insect queen with long black hair, pale skin, and glowing red eyes. Using her spiritual body manifestation, she can transform into an insectile monster with numerous appendages sticking out of her back. While she doesn't have a traditional weapon, she can use the corpses of the dead to create an army of soldiers, similar to Jinwoo. She debuted in chapter 140, when she, along with 2 other monarchs, ambushed Christopher Reed in his home and brutally murdered him. During the Monarch War arc, she was one of the monarchs who agreed to go and fight against Jinwoo. So, soon after, she, the Beast Monarch, and the Frost Monarch surrounded Jinwoo in Seoul and attacked him all at once. One of Qureshi's punches even managed to hurt Jinwoo, but she soon got distracted by one of Jinwoo's shadows, Beru. She took hold of Beru and tried to make him surrender to her, but the Ant King soon freed himself, which gave Jinwoo an opportunity to slice her in half. She immediately regenerated and tried using her venom on Jinwoo. However, to her surprise, it didn't work as the hunter was immune to her poison-based abilities. Enraged, she activated her spiritual body manifestation to go all out and kill Jinwoo, but he easily stopped her and used his mutilation skill to cut her up into hundreds of pieces, finally killing the monarch. 1 done, 9 left to go, and let's continue with Yogamut, the monarch of transfiguration and the king of demon specters. In the novel, Yogamut is said to be the greatest sorcerer in the chaos world, which makes sense because his magic was incredibly powerful. His design is also different from that of the other monarchs. He looks like an old man with gray hair and red eyes and wears an old dark cloak. We don't really know anything about his backstory, and he made his first appearance in chapter 111, where we saw him talk to the Frost Monarch. Song Jinwoo's father tried to kill him in the same chapter, but failed. Later, when the Frost Monarch asked the monarchs to help him kill Jinwoo, he was one of the 2 who backed off. A smart decision, considering what happened to Qureshi. Once Jinwoo killed the 3 initial monarchs that attacked him, we saw Yogamut update the Dragon King about the situation. Fast forward to the final battle, Yogamut is the one who created the massive portals to summon the Dragon Army and the other monarch armies to Earth. The interesting thing here is that monarch's armies outnumbered Jinwoo's forces 100 to 1, meaning Yogamut was able to teleport over 10 million soldiers, which is extremely impressive. Although Yogamut thought that this was going to be more than enough to defeat the hunter, he immediately realized he was wrong when Jinwoo activated Dragon's Fear, completely stunning him. We don't know what happened to Yogamut after that in this timeline, but after the rewind, Yogamut was the second last monarch that Song Jinwoo killed. In the end, I think it's safe to say that he was on the weaker end of the monarch spectrum, and we never learned much about his abilities and powers. Number 8. Tarnok, the monarch of the iron body and the king of monstrous humanoids. The interesting thing about Tarnok is that he has the most human-looking design out of all other monarchs. He's a tall, strong, and good-looking young man with blonde hair and green eyes. Same as Qureshi, he was first introduced in chapter 140 and was among the monarchs who pulled up to Christopher Reed's home. Although Tarnok had a massive ego, he was one of the monarchs who refused to go after Jinwoo initially. This is why we only saw him fight during the final battle when he pulled up with Yogamut and Dragon King, but he wasn't of much help there. You see, he came face to face with Thomas, but because Belion and Beru were with Thomas, he couldn't really do anything. His spiritual body manifestation allowed him to transform into a gigantic monster with green flames coming out of him. However, despite this, he was easily defeated. Ultimately, he just didn't have the independence or raw strength of the stronger monarchs. Even before Jinwoo became the Shadow Monarch, Tarnok knew he couldn't take him down. Number 7, Sealad, the monarch of frost and the king of snowfolk. Sealad was portrayed as a calm but arrogant individual. He looked like a buff old elf with blue skin and long silver hair. He got a lot of screen time compared to other monarchs, so we know a bit more about him. His first appearance was in chapter 107, right after the Jeju Island gate was cleared. Although Jinwoo was only level 100 at the time, Sealad sensed his power and made sure to show up and investigate. Later, when Sealad was searching for a ruler's vessel in the US, both he and Yogamut were attacked by Jinwoo's dad, but got away. Before the Monarch's War, Szilard fought against Go-Gunhee after moving his office to a separate dimensional space. Go-Gunhee's body was then taken over by the greatest fragment of brilliant light. Although Gunhee put up a great fight, Szilard was stronger. He then fatally wounded Gunhee, but not before the latter broke the dimensional rift, which allowed Jinwoo to sense him. Using Shadow Exchange, Jinwoo teleports to Go-Gunhee's location, and Szilard immediately realizes that this guy is Shadow Monarch's vessel. He also realizes that the Architect's plan didn't work, and that Sung Jinwoo is now a threat. He managed to escape and later held a meeting with the other monarchs, where he explained that they should team up and kill Jinwoo before it was too late. Soon after, Szilard, together with Plague and Beast Monarch, arrives in Seoul to fight him. Although Koresha was easily killed by our boy, Szilard proved to be much stronger than her, especially when it comes to pure physical prowess. Eventually, Szilard and the Beast Monarch actually succeeded in killing Jinwoo by piercing his heart. Little did they know that this was only going to make Jinwoo stronger, because as soon as his heart was pierced, his black heart started beating. While Jinwoo was recovering, his father stepped in to stall the monarchs. Despite Szilad's strength, he and the Beast Monarch couldn't defeat Sung Il-hwan in time, and the Beast Monarch even started running away. However, Szilard stayed on the battlefield and even managed to slice off Il-hwan's hand with a massive ice storm. He then summoned a giant ice meteor, but at that point, Jinwoo regained consciousness, and Beru easily destroyed it. After that, it wasn't long before Jinwoo slashed Szilard across his chest and finally killed the Frost Monarch. Unlike many other monarchs, Szilard played an actual role in the story and wasn't afraid to battle Jinwoo even when the odds were heavily against him, which is why I think he deserves 7th spot on the list. Okay, Szilard was undoubtedly incredibly strong, but there are still 6 monarchs stronger than him left to cover, and I can't wait to show you guys the top 3 ones. But before that, let's continue with Rakan, the monarch of fangs and king of beasts. Rakan is a pure animal. In the novel, he is also said to be the greatest hunter in the Chaos world. He is a big, muscular man with yellow glowing eyes, sharp teeth, and messy black hair. In the story, he was introduced in chapter 107 alongside Szilard, and was also among the 3 monarchs who killed Christopher Reed. When Turnok and Yogamund refused to fight Jinwoo, Rakan called them cowards and agreed to fight him himself. During the war in Seoul, he appeared first before Szilard and Koresha and started rampaging through the city. Thomas tried to put up a fight against him, but the difference in their power became evident once Rakan used his spiritual body manifestation. This ability transformed Rakan into a white wolf form, in which his physical abilities were greatly increased. Also, if angered, he'll grow in size so much that he can be seen from blocks away. Germany's strongest hunter, Lennart Nierman, managed to save Thomas just in time, and Sung Jinwoo finally arrived himself, smashing Rakan into the ground. Later on, he was the one who landed a finishing blow on Jinwoo by piercing his heart with his claws. Once Jinwoo's black heart started beating, Rakan tried to finish him off, but he and Szilard were unable to go through Il-hwan. Unable to finish Jinwoo in time, Rakan realized they stood no chance now and fled. He hid somewhere in a secluded forest on the other side of the world, planning to wait until the Dragon King arrived to help. Unfortunately for him, Jinwoo immediately found him and teleported to his location. Now, Rakan loved calling Tarnak and Yogamund cowards, but as soon as he saw Jinwoo standing in front of him, he turned into the biggest coward of all and started pathetically begging for forgiveness. Lucky for him, Jinwoo accepted, but on one condition. Since Rakan struck him with his claws 5 times, now he has to survive 5 attacks from Jinwoo. It's important to remember that just one of these attacks was enough to kill Szilard, but surprisingly enough, Rakan survives the first 3 back to back. He only died once Jinwoo struck him the 4th time, which confirms that Rakan is much more durable than Szilard or any of the previous monarchs we covered. Number 5, Baran, the monarch of white flames and the king of demons. As the king of demons, Baran looked like, well, a demon. He had gray skin, glowing white eyes, flaming white hair, a long tail, and 4 gray horns. Now, I know many of you are going to think that Baran being in 5th place doesn't make any sense. I mean, Baran is the first monarch Jinwoo killed back in the Demon Castle arc when he was only level 93. However, it's important to remember that the Baran Jinwoo killed was just a weak clone, and that the real Baran was much more powerful than that. In battle, Baran can command the Hell's army of demons and summon soldiers via portals. He also has lightning breath as well as insane speed and durability. He used a badass sword as a weapon, which Sung Jinwoo gained after defeating him. In the past, Baran, alongside Rakan, were the 2 monarchs that were sent by the Dragon King to kill the Shadow Monarch. This means that even Dragon King thought he was powerful enough for that task. They managed to eliminate most of the Shadow army, but couldn't do much to the Shadow Shadow Monarch himself. Rakan simply ran away the moment he saw an opportunity, which left Baran all by himself against the Shadow Monarch. The Shadow Monarch asked why the monarchs betrayed him, but when Baran refused to give an answer, he was killed. Later on, the architect recreated him as the final boss of the Demon Castle. I'd say Baran and Rakan are close to each other in strength, but considering how one is a coward, while the other had the dog in him till the end, Baran deserves to be placed above Rakan. Number 4, Legia, the monarch of the beginning and king of giants. Back when the war between the monarchs and rulers first started, Legia was the first monarch to get captured and restrained by the rulers. This collapsed the balance of power and completely tipped the scales of the war. In simpler terms, Legia's capture was such a big deal that the balance between light and darkness finally collapsed. So I think it's safe to say that he was incredibly strong. Also, he's called the monarch of the beginning, which sounds more important than some of the other monarchs' titles. Now, Legia is a huge, muscular man with bluish-gray skin, messy hair and beard, and glowing red eyes. As I already mentioned, he was defeated before the start of the main story and was basically just used by the rulers to reinforce Earth with mana. He was introduced in chapter 137 as the final boss of the S-rank gate in Tokyo. Even though he was still restrained at that point and his real powers had been concealed, just a few dozen of his giants were enough to destroy the major cities of Japan. S-rank hunters were no match for them, and even if some national level hunters pulled up, it's questionable if they'd be able to stop them. Liu Chigang fought just one of the giants who had crossed over to the other side of the sea, and that was enough for him to admit that the giants are rough. So just imagine if he had to fight 10 or 20 at the same time. Luckily for Earth, Sung Jinwoo was already beyond the national level at that point, so he and his shadow army took down the giants, and he eventually confronted Legia himself. Legia tried to trick him into an alliance by only giving him half-truths, but Jinwoo saw through it and killed the monarch, as even he knew that a monster like this couldn't be free again. Another reason why Legia was most definitely one of the strongest monarchs is because of the race he ruled over. The giants are unreasonably strong, and even a normal fodder giant can easily be the boss of a high-ranking gate. Besides dragons, they are possibly the strongest race in solo leveling. There are only 3 monarchs left to cover, and these 3 are so much stronger than any other monarch we covered so far. Ashborn, the monarch of shadows and king of the dead. Ashborn was Sung Jinwoo's predecessor as the Shadow Monarch, and was also the one who chose him to be the player and gradually inherits his powers. However, before becoming the Shadow Monarch, Ashborn was actually a ruler and was known as the greatest fragment of brilliant light, being the most powerful ruler in existence. Back when he was a ruler, he was a white knight with large white wings, long silver hair, and glowing white eyes. But as the Shadow Monarch, he was a warrior with glowing purplish flame-like hair, glowing purple eyes, jet black armor, and a pure black sword. So how did Ashborn even become the Shadow Monarch? Well, for that, we need to start with his birth at the beginning of time and space. As a ruler, Ashborn, alongside his other rulers, fought the monarchs for a long time. However, at one point, the rulers realized that the absolute being was simply using them for entertainment, so they rebelled. Ashborn was the only one who stayed loyal to the absolute being, but he was defeated when the other rulers teamed up against him. Although he accepted his death, instead of dying, he was somehow reborn as the one who rules over death. This is because the absolute being had hidden the power of death within him. However, by the time he regained consciousness, the absolute being was already dead, and the rulers had assumed its throne. As the Monarch of Shadows, Ashborn gained the ability to resurrect any dead creature as a shadow. This shadow would then be loyal to him and fight on his side. This pretty much meant that Ashborn could get stronger and stronger indefinitely simply by creating more shadows. On top of that, he also had Shadow Exchange, an ability to instantly teleport to any shadow's location, and Monarch's Domain, which allowed him to buff the strength of all his shadows in battle by 50%. Later on, when the rulers captured Legia, Ashborn decided to join the monarchs to keep the balance. But then, Rakan and Baran suddenly turned on him. They did this on Dragon King's orders, since he was afraid of Ashborn's strength and couldn't trust him. Although Ashborn managed to defeat them and kill Baran, his shadow army was basically annihilated in the process. That's also when the rulers appeared and asked for his forgiveness. He became conflicted and emotionally overwhelmed, so instead of giving an answer, he simply left to rebuild his shadow army. With Ashborn gone, the rulers took this opportunity and finally defeated the monarchs. Eventually, when Ashbourne returned, he found monarchs in a really bad state. They had also lost 2 of their own, so the Dragon King was actually happy to welcome Ashbourne back into their ranks. Keep in mind that at this point, Ashbourne didn't know it was the Dragon King who ordered Baran and Rakan to kill him earlier. Anyways, when the monarchs descended to Earth, Ashbourne's and Dragon King's power was too much to be contained by a human vessel, which is why the architect offered to build a special program in order to create a perfect vessel that could sustain the monarch's power. Ashbourne chose Sung Jinwoo as the vessel, and the rest, as they say, is history. By the way, why Jinwoo? Well, it's because Ashbourne was impressed by how, despite being incredibly weak, Jinwoo managed to evade death countless times and was always ready to risk his life for his family. Through the system, Ashbourne and the architect started molding Jinwoo into a perfect vessel. Once Jinwoo reached level 100, the architect invited him back to the double dungeon so that Ashbourne could take over his body. However, instead of doing that, Ashbourne decides to transfer all of his powers to Jinwoo instead, therefore making him the next Shadow Monarch. He then takes the administrator's access from the architect and allows Jinwoo to kill him. Later, when Jinwoo dies battling against Beast and Frost monarchs, he suddenly finds himself in a world where everything is fine and he's strong enough to take care of anything. However, he soon realizes that it's just an illusion, and he tells the one who cast the spell to show themselves. It turns out to be Ashbourne himself. He finally introduces himself to Jinwoo and tells his complete story. And when he is done, he asks Jinwoo to make the choice: live in this world of illusions forever, or go back and continue the battle. Jinwoo makes the choice, receives Ashbourne's true powers, and returns to the real world as a complete Shadow Monarch. In the end, Ashbourne was simply tired of it all and just wanted to find someone to take over, someone who could actually finish things for him. Sung Jinwoo was simply that someone. So how strong was Ashbourne exactly? Well, considering he took on both Baran and Rakan at the same time and won, it's pretty obvious that he is one of the strongest monarchs in existence. If his shadow army wasn't destroyed, he might have even become the strongest one at some point. Before we cover the strongest monarch in the entire series, let's first cover the second strongest: Antares, the monarch of destruction and the king of dragons. Antares was without a doubt the strongest and the most dangerous monarch of them all. He ruled over dragons, the most powerful race in the show, and wielded the kind of destructive power that could annihilate everything in his path. Antares could incinerate entire armies with his flames, and his raw strength was unmatched in the entire verse. In terms of appearance, Antares was a tall, strong man with long red hair, a short beard, and glowing red eyes. However, once he activates his spiritual body manifestation, he transforms into an enormous red dragon. Everything about this guy just screams raw power. Despite being the embodiment of destruction, he is a rational being who is always willing to negotiate with those who are strong. For example, we already talked about how he accepted Ashbourne back when the monarchs were on the losing side of the war, and he was also willing to negotiate with Jinwoo later on in the series. Like Ashbourne, Antares also couldn't find a vessel strong enough to contain his powers. However, in the Solo Leveling Ragnarok sequel, Sung Jinwoo's son is currently going through the system to become Antares' successor. So we can assume that containing his power should be possible in a similar way Jinwoo contained Ashbourne's. Anyways, in the main story, Antares debuted in chapter 163. After he learned from Yogamund that Jinwoo turned against the monarchs and killed 3 of them, he decided to act. Soon after, Antares and his dragon army arrived on Earth through a gate in Canada. There, Canada's strongest hunter, Jay Mills, was his first victim, and from there on out, Antares goes on to massacre thousands of people, including named characters like Adam White. When Sung Jinwoo finally appeared on the battlefield, he stopped Antares' army with Dragon Spear and used Shadow Exchange to take Antares to a remote island near Japan. And this is where the epic battle between Jinwoo and the King of Dragons began. This is where Antares showcased his full strength, easily countering Jinwoo's attacks without taking any damage. He complimented Jinwoo's plan to separate him from the dragon army, and then casually asked Jinwoo to team up so they can defeat the rulers together. In return, he offers to spare Jinwoo's family, his country, or even the entire world. But Jinwoo refuses, and the fight continues. Although it seemed like Antares had the upper hand throughout the fight, what he didn't know was that Jinwoo was intentionally trying to piss him off into leaving himself open. And when that finally happened, Jinwoo sliced him with his father's dagger. This caught Antares by surprise, but he was even more shocked once rulers and their armies Antares entered the battlefield as well. As it turned out, the battle between Antares and Jinwu distorted space so much that the rulers could descend in their true forms without any problems. Soon after their arrival, Antares, the king of dragons, got stabbed with their spears and died, admitting his defeat. However, when Jinwu asked the rulers to rewind time using the Cup of Reincarnation, Antares was revived as well, along with the memories of his defeat. In this new timeline, Jinwu defeats all other monarchs and their armies before coming face to face with Antares again. But by this point, Jinwu was exponentially stronger because his shadow army absorbed all those other armies, so he managed to defeat Antares relatively easy by himself. Ultimately, the King of Dragons was worthy of being called the strongest. He commanded the strongest race, he had insane fire magic, and his dragon's fear was powerful enough to temporarily paralyze anyone weaker than him, which basically included just about everyone. But not this one person. Sung Jinwu, the new Shadow Monarch. Although Jinwu started out as the weakest E-rank hunter, through the power of the system, he quickly became one of the strongest beings in the world. Through the system, he slowly started getting all of Ashbourne's abilities, which included Shadow Extraction, Shadow Exchange, and Monarch's Domain. With these new abilities, he slowly started building a shadow army of his own, completely unaware of where these powers came from. In chapter 130, when he finally returned to the Double Dungeon, he learned the truth about his powers and got the Black Heart from Ashbourne. This boosted his mana to over 100,000, but it wasn't where his growth stopped. As we already discussed in chapter 164, Jinwu became the true Shadow Monarch after being killed by Frost and Beast monarchs. At this point, Jinwu was already one of the strongest monarchs alive, as he showed during his battle against Antares. However, we can't really be sure if he was stronger than him, considering their battle was prematurely stopped by the rulers. But that doesn't matter, because after Jinwu rewinded time and defeated all monarchs again, he solidified himself as the strongest monarch of all time, and it wasn't even close. He easily defeated Antares this time around, and his shadow army numbered over 10 million soldiers. It goes without a doubt that he also surpassed his predecessor, Ashbourne, many times over. By the end of the series, he is a somewhat omnipotent entity who can't die and just keeps getting stronger. In fact, he is so strong that in the Ragnarok sequel, his opponents are actually the absolute beings of other universes. But